पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात्
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron, everybody, here on ParaX Radio. And my guest tonight is author Clint Marsh, and we're going to be talking about a lost classic in the metaphysical world, Swami Panchadasi's Clairvoyant and Occult Powers, which was originally written back in 1916. And the interesting thing is, the 20 lessons in mentalism from the turn-of-a-century guru are pretty much the same teachings that we're learning today. But some of the terminology may be a little bit different, but surprisingly, nothing much has changed in the past century. Clint Marsh is the author of the Mentalist Handbook, an explorer's guide to astral, spirit, and psychic worlds. And his interest in the occult came at a very early age because while most 6-year-olds were reading See Spot Run, Clint was combing through a library of occult books left by the previous owner of a house his family moved into. 13 years later, he started his own publishing company, Wonderella Printed, and began issuing pamphlets of his and others' writing and art. And as the years went by, his publications leaned increasingly towards the esoteric subject matter that interested him when he was just a boy. As always, if any of you have any questions or comments for Clint, please send me a private message because this is going to be a fascinating show. And in the meantime, please join me in welcoming Clint Marsh. Hey, Clint, and thanks for popping in this evening.
Hi, Marla. Really happy to be here.
Oh, I love reading old books, and some of them are so archaic. They give us a first-hand view of what life was like way back when. But as I was saying in the introduction, I found this one rather interesting because the old saying, everything old is new again, really does apply, I think, to the information in the Swami's book. For the most part, it kind of seems like it could have been written by a New Ager. So, to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about Swami Panchadasi and his connection to his alter ego, or vice versa, William Walker Atkinson?
I'd be happy to. Yeah, thank you. Swami Panchadasi is this. The intro music was great. I don't know why Tim said he put on the wrong song. That got us right into the mood of the Swami.
Well, it was. Mine was a little Swami-ish as well. Not quite as
Okay.
Swami-ish, but all right.
It was
And mine was a
wonderful.
little bit shorter too.
Okay. I liked it. It was fun. That same kind of mood is what people were really first getting their taste of in the United States in the early 20th century, right around in the Victorian era and into the first years of the 20th century. And that's when Swami Panchadasi came on the scene. He was part of this outburst of authors who were writing about what we call today magic, and what had been called magic in the past. But at the time, what was really popular was this idea of mind over matter, or some kind of scientific or psychic way of seeing into the unknown. And so the Swami came out with 3 books. There was The Human Aura. He was an expert with seeing auras and working with those. There was The Astral World, another one of his best-selling books, and Clairvoyance and Occult Powers, which is the book that Wiser Books and I have just come out with this new edition of it. And the Swami was just this very mysterious figure, only had these 3 books, but he was an associate with William Walker Atkinson. And I'd heard of both names in my early research for the Mentalist Handbook, the book that I wrote, came out a few years ago. And as soon as I started looking into the Swami and Atkinson, I realized, these guys were some of the first inspirations for my work almost 10 years ago. And William Walker Atkinson was someone who, he'd been a successful businessman and a lawyer, but he needed something more in his life, and the stress of his job actually led him to a great breakdown, and he couldn't get any healing through regular science. He couldn't find any peace mentally or physically until he discovered something called mental science. And this was a mind over matter. Your thoughts are the most important thing in human life. They can heal you where medicine can't. And Atkinson got into this idea, and he started talking to all of these Eastern masters that were coming into the United States from India. And along the line, he met Swami Panchadasi. And this was about midway through a switching careers for Atkinson, where he switched from legal work and straight business to publishing. And his publishing work spanned several decades. And in that time, he came out with over 120 books and pamphlets on different topics like clairvoyance and astral travel and different occult topics. Some of them were fascinating thing I ever learned about Atkinson. It was not how to read a crystal ball, how to see into the future, anything like this. It was that Swami Panchadasi was made out of pure imagination. This man came straight out of William Walker Atkinson's head and onto the page. And not only that, Swami Panchadasi was a bestseller on these topics, but Atkinson himself was a bestseller on these topics. And so he had a whole stable of writers, and the Swami was just one of them.
Well, I think, the fact, and you may agree with me here, that the concept of the Swami writing this book back in those days was much more credible in people's minds than just a regular guy.
William Walker Atkinson, before he was in law, he was a grocer. And would you buy a book that said produce and occult powers? No.
Well, I might. You never know.
If they had some good Indian food recipes in it, then maybe
there you go.
Yeah, but we take for granted Indian culture in the United States today, but it was a very exotic thing at the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it seemed exotic to Atkinson when he was ready to work with these writings and these publishings. It's not the only Indian mystic name that he took on. Some of his best-selling works to this day are 14 Lessons in Yogi Philosophy. You can get that at any New Age store, and it's a great yoga primer. And that was written by Yogi Ramacharaka. Well, it's, again, another pseudonym. And I just think it's wonderful that he felt free to write under his own name, felt very free with his knowledge and being confident about this, but also thought, well, some people are going to not believe me, or they're not going to understand this work unless I put some more mystery around it. And I think that even today we still love that kind of thing. There's great aesthetics to magic even today.
Right. And, again, as you said, back in that time, they were so mystical. You could think of cobras coming out of baskets and turbans and, dots on the forehead and everything. This was way before call centers came into play. So, there was that really good kind of mysterious stuff going on. Now things have changed a little bit, I think. I want to talk a little bit about terminology and define a couple of words for us. Starting with mentalist. I mean, for example, the amazing Kreskin calls himself a mentalist, but he claims to have no psychic ability. And then there's the TV show The Mentalist, whose lead character also has no psychic abilities. And since you wrote the Mentalist Handbook, I mean, who better than to set us straight on some of this?
Well, I will do my best. Thank you. It will be a feat of mentalism. I do have an interesting story about the TV show, so don't let me forget to talk about the TV show here. Like I said, I was really surprised just last year when I started diving back into the world of Swami Panchadasi and friends that I had in my own library of research some of his early books there, and because I'd forgotten the name, and then when it was dusted off, I said, oh yeah, of course, this was a real early figure for me, a really early inspiration for my writing. In the late 90s, I was just tired of spending all my time getting nowhere trying to understand magic and the other worlds, and just what was it all about? I wanted to know. And so I thought, well, I love these old writings, and I love that they used to come out in little pamphlet forms. You can still join the Rosicrucians and get your pamphlets in the mail, and I love that. So I'm going to come out with pamphlets. I've been doing that under other topics, and I thought I'm going to write on these psychic abilities and all these spirits and different topics. And so I thought, well, I'm going to come out with a series, and what's it about? So the Mentalist Handbook was originally written as 6 individual pamphlets that I sent out through the mail to subscribers, and I like that word, mentalist, because it's not magic, and it's not psychic, and it's not astral, but it's all those things together. And what I'm talking about is that you wrap your mind around reality. And if you can think of something, you can make it real. Thoughts are things, and that's something that's very prevalent even today in psychic studies and in magic studies. And so I chose mentalism because I really wanted to emphasize the mind aspect of it. And it's been a good word for me. I do get some. My brother is a professional stage magician, and so he said, well, mentalism, that's sleight of hand. And I think we play a little bit of sleight of hand on ourselves every time we work with this, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to start. And it's funny because it's like you're reading my mind, because some of the things that you just talked about, we are going to talk about. I have it written down, so that's a little spooky. All right, so all right, now we know what mentalist. What is an occultist? Or to me, it's kind of like an umbrella term.
I'm sorry.
Kind of like an umbrella term that covers lots of different things, Kind of like.
I've been thinking about the word occultist a lot these past few months, because you get to talking to people. They say, oh, what do you do? And they say, oh, I'm writing about these different things. They say, okay, well, what number am I thinking of? Or how many fingers am I holding up? Or let's channel Mary Baker Eddy right now. I can't do any of those things at the drop of a hat. And you know, if I saw someone who could, then I'd be really skeptical about them. And so the difference between, say, what you might call a magician, someone who's really going to go there and show you a magic trick or express a magic power, that might be a magician. But I feel like part of me is a magician, but really I just love all these old books. I love to think about this work. I love to apply it where I can in my life. And I think that makes me an occultist. And so that's what I'd say is an occultist or occultism.
Okay. Now, you mentioned, I listened to the replay of your interview on Coast to Coast last week, where you were talking about thoughts or things. And again, you kind of alluded to the fact that if you know what you want, if you focus in your mind, you envision it being accomplished, it will happen. Now, that theory could also apply to things like the power of positive thinking, the power of the mind. It also actually is kind of the formula for spell casting, because that's basically what we do as well. You know, we call them the powers that be. We use tools to help things along, but pretty much it's the same thing. I always tell people when they're talking about spells to envision it as if it's already been accomplished.
Sure.
So, I mean, that it all kind of starts fumbling around into the same basket, doesn't it?
Well, that's why I was so excited to hear from you and get a chance to talk on the show tonight, because most of the people who pick up this book, I don't think are going to come at it from a pagan or a witchcraft background. I think that more people are going to be interested in the psychic side of it or in the old-timey book side of it. But when I sat down with this and thought, well, what should we talk about on a show about witchcraft? Well, it's the same thing, really. And what Atkinson did so deftly in his work was he reframed the old ways for a new century. I think he really looked at spell casting and all these same powers that the traditional witch might know. You've got clairvoyance, healing, crystal balls. You can travel astrally, have influence over your everyday life, communicate mentally, all these witch abilities. And he said, well, I believe in science. And he really was a big believer in science. And so, you know, how am I going to describe this scientifically? And so that was how he framed all of these occult powers in his book, because science and technology, the Industrial Revolution was finally through for all intents and purposes, and science had the upper hand. And so this was a wonderful way, and I think probably the only way that these old ways could continue and be brought into a new century.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the scientific aspect, because if I'm not mistaken in reading through the book, all these things, all these lessons, all these exercises, all this stuff about mind reading and clairvoyance and psychometry and all of that stuff does not really include any talk of spirits or mediums. It seems like it's almost a more scientific approach.
It's not a religious book, and I've got to applaud it for that too, and for Atkinson to not go there, we'd say today, with that kind of work, because he's really saying anyone can apply this. And so I think it's great that we could pick up this book as witches, we could pick up this book as magicians, or just people who are interested in everyday life and in getting something more or having a better life, and just apply it that way. So he's not saying you have to be a Christian, you have to be a pagan. I don't think that would have gotten him anywhere. He's not even saying you have to be a Hindu. This first pages in Swami Panchadasi's book says, I'm actually not going to tell you any Hindu secrets here. It comes at it from a very Western viewpoint. And once you find out it's good old Bill Atkinson, then you say, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, I think there was a line in there that the Swami was not writing from a Hindu point of view. He was writing for Western audiences.
Yeah, certainly was.
Yeah, I mean, he had a good start at that. Yeah, I was asked a question the other day as it applies to witchcraft, but I think it also applies here as well as far as the thought processes and all the learning. the person who asked the question wondered if they had to be a witch to do magic. So does the person have to be psychic to acquire occult powers, such as clairvoyance or mediumship? What do you think?
What do I think? No. I think that it's something that we all have within us anyway. And the just the brilliant way that this is taught in Clairvoyance and Occult Powers is Atkinson says, look, I want you to think about your five senses, right? We've got sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. These are the things how we interact with life. And everybody, I mean, except for those who are disabled, have got those ways of interacting with the world. And so what he does then is he says, we're going to start with those five senses, but have you ever had an experience where you thought somebody was watching you and you turned around and they were, and you didn't hear them, you didn't see them because they were behind your eyes? Well, this is something that Atkinson was calling a sixth sense. And he called it the sense of the presence of life. And he thought it was his idea that everyone has this, and with this training, you can awaken that. He didn't even stop at six senses. He said we also have a seventh sense. And there are other teachers along the way or at the same time who have added even more to that list. But, six is enough.
Yeah, once we get a handle on six, then we might want to move to seven. Yeah. We've got a comment from Reverend Tim who will tell it to you. He'll come in and tell it rather than me translating it from the typing. Tim, come on in.
Well, hi. Clint, I've got to tell you, this is amazing because I'm sitting here and my religion is modern spiritualism, and it's golden age. And I'm sorry, my little sister Marla right now is chuckling because I do work with the craft a little bit. So, but may I say that what I can't believe is the similarity between the philosophies of that age, of the golden age of spiritualism. The influence.
So you're saying the similarity between what?
Between Swami's work, Atkinson's work, and how it actually ties in its dogma, its philosophy. Actually, some of the actual names are actually used by spiritualists during this time period. It's amazing. And in the 1916 time frame, it was when the churches, the spiritualist church, was starting to go and organize itself as a religious body to ward off political persecution. So I was sitting here thinking to myself, for some reason, all of this philosophy seems so familiar. And it's not just because I'm a spiritualist. It's because I read the pamphlets. When I was training as a medium, when I was going through the unfoldment process, when I was doing for my ordination, we had to go and we had to really get a broad range of knowledge from all different times and areas of the spiritualist movement. I sat at the Skidmore Library at the Lilydale Spiritualist Assembly for literally days and days and days, going through its stacks, and I remember reading original pamphlets. I am just like so honored. I am going and I'm going to buy your book like ASAP because it brings back so much of the basic philosophy of the spiritualist movement during that time, during that what we consider the golden age. So thank you for doing that. You just spurred a memory that I haven't thought probably in a good 20 years.
Oh my goodness! Well, thank you, Tim. Yeah.
Now
those old books really they're unbeatable, and that's why we're calling this a lost classic here. This really is a book that we can go back to today. It's almost 100 years old, and we can get wonderful teachings out of it. Now, Atkinson and his entire stable of imaginary writers they were just one little part of a huge movement that was going on at the time, and this could be traced back to mesmerism. This is Mesmer, the very well, he's uncanny how he could magnetize people. You have animal magnetism, and he's going to put you in a trance. And he was really scientificizing, to coin a terrible word, these magical powers and bringing it ahead. Another church that spun off of this is Church of Christ Scientists.
Right.
Oh
my God, yes.
Part of the mental science movement.
Sorry, Marla, I just jumped up because, oh my
No,
God.
it's just you're having an epiphany. I'm really happy.
Oh, it's amazing because these are things that I haven't thought about in so many years. This was all part of my early training. And I remember that when we started working with mesmerism and we started going through the Davis time periods and going into like the later 1800s, going through the Victorian age, and then emerging right around World War I, that all of this was so common knowledge. All these words, all the sixth sense that came out, the interest in development of your psychic powers. This was something that the common person was so greatly interested in. This is amazing to me. It's just so amazing to me. I'm going to have to go down to Lilydale, and I'm going to have to bribe my way back into the stacks of the Skidmore Library so I can get my hands just to see a couple of originals.
Oh, you have to, yeah.
Well, I'm going to go, and Marla, my little sister, I promise I won't be bothering you the rest of the show. But thank you, Clint.
Oh, you can break in if you have another epiphany.
But I mean, seriously, thank you, Clint, because this is something that really meant a lot to me. Just the shaking of the gray matter that's in my brain, because this is something. God. People don't understand that what we're learning today, what is New Age, is actually Old Age, and we're just going and relearning it. And what you're doing by applying it in this way, and then Marla applying it to the craft, is so intricate and so integral to what we should all be doing today. And the philosophy of it is so great. So thank you, guys. Have a great show.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Wonderful to hear your stories with that.
Whenever
I understand it completely, and I get letters from readers all the time, and they say, I've just discovered your book, and I found all the great teachings in it. Well, let it be a doorway into the research that I've done and the research that anyone can do. Whenever I'm in Los Angeles, for anyone who's listening in Los Angeles, and you don't go to the Philosophical Research Society Library, that is an excellent resource. That is a wonderful place to go. And they've got all the old books, and they've got all the old pamphlets, and you could spend the rest of your life there just learning about these things.
Oh, you shouldn't have told me. I'm too close to L.A.
Oh, you've got to go down there.
I'm here. I'm not going to find it.
I know you'll love it. And if you're up on the upper side of the West Coast, I've got one more plug to make for an event called the Esoteric Book Conference. It'll be in its third year in Seattle this September. I believe it's weekend September 10th and 11th in Seattle, the Esoteric Book Conference. And I go every year. I'll be there signing books and just taking in all the great speakers, their performances, and vendors. It's just all about esoteric books and then practicing magicians today. And they walk on the witchcraft side, they have the ritual magician side, and it's a great group of people, and it's just growing and growing. Esoteric Book Conference.
Oh, that sounds great. You had a story you were going to tell us?
You want to hear a story? Okay.
I want to hear a story. Yeah, then we'll get back to business. I want to hear a story.
All right. Well, we talked about the word mentalism, right, and the word mentalist and where that comes from, and what has been really fun having the Mentalist Handbook out there. It was published in 2008, and it did quite well right off the bat. And the publisher said, "Well, there's a show called The Mentalist," and I read about that and said, "Well, I don't think it's the same thing. I don't think that's really a psychic show." And I've only ever got to see one episode of it just recently. But what happened was the Mentalist Handbook got translated into 2 different languages. We had a Dutch translation. I received that in the mail. I taught myself how to read Dutch because I knew what the book was And then a little while later, I received in the mail a French translation. And what was neat about the French translation was that it had the same great design that Wiser Books gave to the Mentalist Handbook, where it's got this Jeff Hoke picture on the cover and says the Mentalist Handbook, but then on the top half of the book, they put a photograph of Simon Baker, the actor from The Mentalist.
Oh, no.
Some crazy grin right on the cover of the book. And I gave it to my girlfriend, and she said, "Well, you know, he kind of looks like you. You wear a vest." That's what looks cool. So I just had to laugh because it was, obviously they're trying to tie in with something that was quite popular. And I've got to say that the sales are great on that French translation. The reviews are terrible. People pick it up and they say, "This isn't about the TV show at all. This is not, what I expected." But I did get a chance to watch this show eventually, and I think that whether or not they know it, those French publishers were onto something with the connection, because what both my book and that show are talking about is detective work, really. Mm-hmm. They're talking about noticing these details that slip out of our attention. And I think that 50% or even more of any psychic ability is really being grounded in reality and an everyday experience, so that you won't let those details slide by. We've got to have full grasp on all 5 of our senses before we can add a 6th.
It's kind of, again, I've heard, I could be wrong, that we use a very, very tiny little portion of our brains to get by, and so much of it hasn't been used yet. Can you imagine if we used 100% of our brain power, how those 5 senses would just get stronger and stronger and stronger? That may be part of the 6th, just grabbing it all together. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know if I could imagine that. I would imagine it would be quite overwhelming for some.
Well, see, you can't imagine it because we're not using our full potential. That's the problem.
Yeah, if I could, I could.
This is where the problem lies. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about the book, because the book is actually made up of 20 lessons ranging from telepathy to mind reading, crystal ball gazing, astral phenomenon. I like that. Psychic and magnetic healing, and I think that, to me, kind of sounds a little bit like today's Reiki. But they're all topics that are very current today, and I love the back cover of the book, because for those who haven't seen it, it reads, "Gain psychic influence over others, learn to develop and predict the future, master the astral senses, and develop powers of clairvoyance." Almost sounds like a P.T. Barnum thing in a way. But
yeah.
But it's a great come-on, for people at that time to think, well, geez, can we do it? Can anybody do it? And that, I think, is fascinating. Now, one thing also that you talk about in the book are the 3 underlying principles of psychic influence. Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You'll have to explain. You'll have to read to me what they are, and I'll go right off of them.
Of course, I don't have it right here in front of me, so we may just have to skip that right this second.
Okay, yeah, I'm just not sure which lesson you're talking about there.
When I looked at it, it was really kind of fascinating. Let me just take a quick, if you want to sing for a minute.
Put that song back on. I like that song.
Then we have to dance. That might be something, with the little finger symbols and all that.
There are 3 steps in making your thoughts into reality. Is that what you're talking about?
It was psychic influence. I think it's laws and principles.
We've got, in Atkinson's work and in this book, the last third of the book is devoted to practical applications. And you could say that the lead up to all that is very practical too. We're trying to develop our 6th sense. We're looking into the future. We're using a crystal ball, so forth. But the last few chapters of the book, Atkinson, it's almost scary. He gets really practical and really concrete with this work, and he says, if you want something, you can bring it into your life. I'm talking about money. I'm talking about health. And it's only because he has used such a warm tone and encouragement throughout the book so far that at that point I didn't say, whoa, who is this guy now? But he's really stressing the ethics and to the kind of the golden rule all throughout the book. You know, you don't want to abuse your abilities in life anyway. Why would you do it if you are, you know, using these additional senses and these additional talents that you could have? But at the same time, he does eventually lay it out, and he says there's something you can do that if you have a thought, you can make it real. And it boils down to this very simple set of instructions. He says the first thing you need of 3 is you need the strong desire. You have to really want what you want. Find out what you want and why you want it. You have to have that strong desire. And then number 2 is a visualization, a very clear visualization of what it is that you want. And that's what we were talking about earlier tonight. We said, just pretend like life is already the way you want it to be. That's the visualization. You're not fooling yourself. What you're doing is you are living as if your dream has already come true. And that's valuable advice for anyone. And then 3 is this very strong concentration that you've got to keep on that visualization and on that desire. You have to keep focused on it and follow through. And of course, he's not just talking about sitting around and wishing for something, but when we do this, we will get up and we will work toward those goals. If we don't, then we obviously don't want them. And so what he's doing with this 3-step plan here is really developing presence of mind and presence of mind for what you want, and then concentration and self-confidence to carry it out.
And as I said earlier, in witchcraft, it's very similar. You know, you focus on a goal. You know, I always say that casting a spell, everybody does it every day in various ways. You don't have to be witchy to do that. I mean, a prayer is a spell. A wish is a spell. You know, you curse somebody, that's a spell. So it all kind of folds in kind of the same way. Like I said, we may use tools, we may call on deities or, you know, spirit guides or something to help us, but it's basically spell casting. You're getting your message out into the ethers, you know, and in a various number of ways. Now, one of the other things in the book that I was really interested in reading was a lot of things about astral phenomena. From astral travel, the Akashic records, to strange astral phenomenon, such as thought forms, and explaining that thoughts frequently take on an astral form, which I didn't, you know, when I first read, I went, okay, and then I went, wait a minute, okay, back to spell work. This is what we do. We're sending out the message to the ethers. But one great example of thought forms and all that was the Hindu mango trick. Do you remember that? Oh, it was fascinating. Can you explain it to our listeners?
Yeah, I'll do my best. It's in one of the ads. I'm sorry?
I just love it. It just, you know, made me chuckle when I read it.
Yeah, it was the Hindu mango tree, and it was really wonderful. You can imagine at the time, and of course it's racist today to our ears to hear something like that, but with this new influx, it was very exotic to hear anything about Hinduism or Orient-related studies. And so in an ad, I think it ran in Popular Science for this book, it said, learn the secrets of the Hindu mango tree. And I'm sure there were people out there saying, I've been dying to know what this is. And this is a trick, you might say, or a feat. It's not a trick as explained by Atkinson, I guess I could say. It's this feat where a Swami, a guru, is sitting there, and he is able to grow an entire tree from a seed right in front of your eyes. And this is done without any kind of trickery, but this is an illustration that Atkinson uses to talk about how powerful the power of suggestion is over other people. And so what the Hindu master is doing while he is performing this mango tree feat is he's helping the other people believe that this could happen. And he's helping them watch it really happen. And does it really happen? It looked like in the book when I was reading it, no, I think there is a tree, but of course then I wouldn't see it, but other people did. And this, I think, is really a beautiful example or beautiful illustration of the whole idea of clairvoyance and occult powers, that if you believe it, you can make it real. And I don't think it's fooling ourselves. I don't think that it's any kind of trickery to others or ourselves when we take part in this, because as you know in your life, if you wanted to be a radio broadcaster, a writer, an artist, any kind of career, then if you put your time into it and put your efforts toward it, you can make it real.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought it was, the way they explained it was, there is the magician, as he calls it, takes a mango seed, plants it in the ground, waves his hands over it, then it causes the first little tiny shoot to appear from the surface, followed by, the trunk, the leaves. It grows until it looks like a full-sized mango tree. And then it even blooms. And then there's even ripe fruit, all in the blink of an eye. And it's like he sees it and gets everybody else there to see it in their own mind's eye. I mean, that's just incredibly fascinating to me, because I'd probably see it so well, I'd probably want to climb the tree,
Yeah, I'm sure there are people who ate that fruit.
There you go. But, there's no mango tree, there never was, but it was, just outside of the mind of the magician and the minds of his audience. And the fact that somebody can do that is absolutely fascinating to me. We had to share that one. Yeah.
Yeah. The mango
that one
tree.
is to think that, that somebody could actually do that. Now, the $64,000 question, have you actually yourself tried and perhaps acquired any clairvoyant or occult powers from the lessons in this book?
From the lessons in this book? I'll say this. A lot of this was very familiar territory for me, because at this point, like you said in the introduction, I've got about 30 years of study and investigation under my belt, even beginning younger than Harry Potter when I started in this work. And along the way, sure, things happen, and I was interested in astral projection as a teenager, and I read books on that and tried that myself, and I had my experiences that I did, and along the way you see something you think is a coincidence, but later you realize, no, actually I'm just more in touch with what's going on here thanks to this study. And so I'm not Superman or anything close to that, no more than the next person, but what I do believe is that we can apply all these teachings to our life in small ways, in subtle ways, and just to see the world through magical eyes is spellcasting at its most profound. You're seeing the mango tree grow every day, and are you living in a fantasy? No, not really. You can still be in reality and still have good relationship with the world and with yourself, even if, in quotes, you are following these magical paths.
Now, I alluded to the fact that you started on this path when you were really quite young, reading all the different books that the lady that owned the house before you guys moved in nicely left. I mean, what a treasure trove that would be. Are you a believer in the psychic realm and the occult world as people are recognizing it today? as far as spirits and spirit guides, maybe angels, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'd say I am. But I don't know that we as human beings yet have the language or the terminology for what's going on. There are a lot of people who will tell you they can name every angel, every alien that they see, and that's wonderful if that's what they can do. I don't have that clear a vision of what's out there, but I believe that there surely is something out there. When I was when I was first getting into this study, there was no popular internet. This was not something that we all had in our homes, and so what I was working from was a collection of books that I had at the house for the first few years, and then when it disappeared, I thought to myself, wow, those books must have been really valuable or really important. I should spend the rest of my life trying to find those books again, so here I am. But I also went to the library in town, the school library too. You could find little things there, and the New Age was upon us already, and so there were works out there. But I was growing up in a small town, and with a lot of people who were either ignorant of these things or just uncomfortable about it altogether, and that's okay. That's really okay. I still talk to people who they've got their outlook in life, and that's fine. But I was looking for someone who I could talk to, and so I've really spent my life looking for those people. And sometimes growing up, they could be, you could meet someone and they'd be friendly about it, or maybe they'd be closed off and judgmental. But it's all changed now. You can go on to the web, and within moments, you could be at your website. People could be at my website, wonderella.org, and we can.
I was just going to ask you that. Good for you. Good.
Yeah, and that's really wonderful. I think that the socially, it's great. I feel really welcome to go to the Esoteric Book Conference. I feel happy to live in California, where I'm surrounded by people of all stripes of belief. And but what I found is that as an adult now, I feel really blessed to have had that time without an instant gratification, information-wise. And because now I think that for individual seekers who are putting themselves out there, it really involves more effort to find their own personal relationship to magic, because you can practically join any kind of group instantly these days, and it's not something that takes much more thought than ordering a pizza, and that's in a way too bad. It's wonderful that you can. It's got its great aspects to it, but I think the immediacy of it doesn't give people the chance to catch up and come to it the way they used to, and I miss that.
Exactly. So why do you think this book, this particular book, and many of the others, have been in publication for the past 100 years when most books have a much shorter shelf life?
Well, because nobody's proven them wrong yet. Unlike a science book, this doesn't actually go out of date, and that's wonderful too. Science is one area where it's great, and it's constantly progressing. It's constantly improving itself, teaching us so much. We all benefit from medicine and internal combustion engine and all these things that have made life better, but we still are looking for what's over the next ridge, and I just don't think that we've got to that point yet where we can know. And so until we do, all of these old books are going to stay with us. They're going to inspire new works like the Mentalist Handbook, and they're just going to stay in print. And people like Tim are going to just have these wonderful experiences. The Swami speaks to everybody. Atkinson speaks to everybody from beyond the grave, almost 100 years later. And so, in my own writing, I think to myself, well, if I'm going to write something, I should write something that can last, that people can really continue to read. And for me, talking about the difference between occultism and being a magician, for me, writing itself is a meditative practice and a real chance for inner work. What do I want to say? And publishing it, putting it out there, is you're casting a spell, really, when you do that. You're sending out your ideas. I always like to send out a lot of encouragement, a good dose of humor, too, when I'm sending things out. And I'd love to get feedback from people, while I still have the chance.
Yeah, well, it's getting information out there, and getting the response back is important, because there's so much throwaway information. You hear it in one ear, goes out the other, and leave it be. But things like this that, as you said, are very thought-provoking, and no, we can't prove or disprove right now, but I think a lot of us have an inkling, even without the need for scientific proof, that there is so much more out there than we can even imagine. We're just, I think, scratching the surface right now. And I'm kind of of the theory that we may never know for sure, but it's what our belief system holds and what we hold with it that I think makes it right in our minds. And we have to be right in our minds, or everything else is wrong. You know what I mean?
I do, and that's when I say thank God, or thank whoever you'd like to thank.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, because without what these books continue to do, and what all this work continues to do, because as people in the 21st century, so many of us try to put a scientific wrap around magic, we're going to fail every time we do that. What this work is doing is continuing to spark our imaginations and to encourage our curiosity, our creativity, and I hope that never goes away for humanity, because we'll stop being human beings, and we'll stop being humanitarian people without reaching out there and really just saying, what if, or I wonder, and let me try this. With too many answers and not enough questions, you're just not going to continue to want to wake up in the morning.
Exactly, and when we stop wondering is the time that we need to get the shovel and dig the hole and jump in with both feet. All right, this hour has flown by. I mean, amazingly, it must be magic. One more time, where can people get a hold of you to find out more about your books and the Swami's books and all those good things?
Please come to Wonderella.org. That's WONDERELLA.org. You can order the books. You can read excerpts from my earlier books. You can request a free catalog, and you can send me any questions or comments you have via email, Wonderella.org.
Great. I want you to stay on the line for a second while I close out, and we'll thank you properly. I'm sure Tim has a great big cyber hug for you on this one, too.
Thanks, Mom.
So, again, thank you so much for being here, and I want to thank everybody for listening as well. And until next time, everybody, blessed be, and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.